In this video, I'm going to show you how you can search for collocations in the corpus of contemporary American English. We use the term collocation to describe words or tokens that have a tendency to appear together. And using COCA, we can uncover patterns in the words that appear with other words. We could, for example, search for patterns in the words that are used around cause.
Into the coals of the fire,
causing widespread flash flooding
that can cause severe illness.
The root causes of the economic downturn.
So what's causing the attacks?
Or we might want to investigate the patterns of representing teenagers in discourse.
Teenage doll is not a pretty picture.
The teenage terror in the schools.
A jock, a rebel.
In order to carry out these kinds of investigations, we will need to use some of COCA's collocational tools. So let's get started. Collocations can help us with different kinds of linguistic analysis, and in this video I want to talk about three. First, they can help us understand structure and syntax. For example, we might want to know what prepositions follow a particular word like the verb talk, and understanding such patterns can provide us important information about patterns that govern usage. Second, they can help us understand how linguistic context contributes to meaning and the ways in which associations accrue to words through patterns of use, areas of study associated with what are called pragmatics and semantic prosody. I'll explain this more in a minute. And third, they can help us carry out studies involving approaches like sociolinguistics and discourse analysis, which sometimes examine the ways in which social and political relationships are constituted and reproduced through language. Let's start with some simple investigations of structure and syntax. There are two basic ways to search for collocations in COCA. One is to just use the basic search field, and I'll start there. Let's say we wanted to search for the prepositions that follow the adjective similar. A search like this might be interesting for at least a couple of reasons. We might be a non-native speaker and not have intuitions about the possibilities, or we might want to investigate the pattern to more fully understand it. I'll start by typing similar into the search field, followed by the tag for all prepositions. The results show that to is by far the most frequent prepositional collocate. But let's dig a little deeper. The second most frequent collocate is in. First, I'm going to click on the result to look at the concordance data. Here we find a number of nouns like style, shape, flavor, and size. These nouns seem to indicate a pattern as they are characteristics of something. Now I want to see if the pattern actually holds up. We'll go back to the search field. First, I'll type similar in. Next, I'll click on collocates, which generates some additional search options. In the new box, I'll type the symbol for the noun tag. This tells COCA that I'm searching for nouns that collocate with the phrase that we've typed in the box above, namely similar in. Next, we have two drop-down lists with numbers. These lists define our range. That is, the first tells COCA the number of words we want to search to the left of our first search string, and the second tells COCA the number of words we want to search to the right. We want nouns that appear after similar in, so I'm going to set the range as 0 to the left and 2 to the right. So our search is this. We're looking for nouns that collocate two words to the right of the phrase similar in. The results confirm our hypothesis. The frequent collocates like size, appearance, nature, and style all indicate characteristics that are being compared. Alright, now that we've done some searches relating to structure, let's explore semantic prosody. But first, let me explain the concept briefly. The idea of collocation is that the same words tend to appear together. Certain words tend to hang out. The idea of semantic prosody is that by habitually hanging out, words can affect the meaning of their collocates, either positively or negatively. To better understand how this works, we might think of collocations as a word's neighborhood. Consider the adjective rife. If we think about its neighbors, like despair, decay, violence, disease, bitterness, corruption, cronyism, abuse, and fraud, it tends to hang out in a pretty rough neighborhood. Thus, we can say rife has a negative semantic prosody. Let's check out an example using COCA. The example I want to explore is one that is well known in corpus linguistics, and one I mentioned at the beginning of the video. What kind of nouns collocate with cause? Like the previous search, for this one we'll use the collocates option in COCA. First I'll type cause in brackets in the search field, so we're finding all forms of cause. In the collocates field, I'll type in the tag for all nouns, and we'll leave the range as 4 tokens to the left and 4 tokens to the right. Like rife, cause collocates with many words that have strongly negative connotations: problems, death, damage, pain, disease, cancer. It too has a negative semantic prosody. Before we move on, I want to call your attention to a couple of features of our search and suggest ways that it could be refined or extended. First, note that I set the range to capture potential examples occurring in a variety of grammatical situations. When you search for collocations, it is often useful to try different ranges. After trying a range, you can look at some concordance lines and see what results you're generating. That information can then help you refine your search even further. Second, note that we didn't specify cause as a particular part of speech. We could, for example, investigate whether there is any variation in collocational patterns with the verb form versus the noun form. Finally, take care when analyzing semantic prosody. Most patterns have exceptions, and we don't want to overstate our results. Some scholars, for example, have suggested that the negative prosody of cause is stronger in some registers than in others. We could investigate that by restricting our search to specific text types using the sections option. Other scholars have explored collocational patterns of cause with positive terms like happiness. I'm going to try that here using the Corpus of Historical American English. The distribution here shows an interesting change over time. Okay, let's do one more search. For this one, I want to give you some quick background on patterns of discourse and how they can shape our social worlds. The relationships among discourse and social structure is sometimes studied using approaches related to sociolinguistics and discourse analysis. In simple terms, one way to think about how those relationships work is to first recognize that we often talk about categories of people in recurrent ways, even groups of people we have little or no contact with. The descriptions of those groups tend to conform to patterns that are replicated. Those patterns, in turn, shape the ways in which we think about or understand those categories. Finally, such perceptions inform social relationships and interactions. Let's see how COCA can help us to investigate these kinds of patterns. I'll type in teenager, and then we'll look for adjectives in the attributive position. That is, adjectives that occur immediately before or one to the left of teenager. We could group these modifiers into a number of different patterns, but for now I'll point out just one. Note the number of adjectives that describe negative behaviors or emotional states. Here we have troubled. Scroll down and we find a few more. And if we keep scrolling, we find even more. What is also interesting about this pattern is that although there are clusters of neutral descriptors, like those relating to nationality or ethnicity, there are very few positive adjectives that collocate with teenager. Also, to demonstrate that the linguistic representation of social categories isn't somehow natural or stable, here is our teenager search in the Corpus of Historical American English. As a social category, teenager is a relatively new invention. Finally, be aware that how you input your search will affect the data that you generate. If we did our teenager search like this is the data that we would get. These are sometimes called clusters or n-grams. These are the most common two-word clusters that contain an adjective followed by a form of teenager. When we carried out our search this way, this is the data we got. These are the most common adjectives that appear before all forms of the word teenager. I encourage you to experiment to figure out the searches best suited to your research questions. Alright, let's review. Collocations are words that tend to appear together. We can use collocational data to better understand English structure. It can also help us understand how context can affect meaning. And it can help us analyze how patterns of use inform our conceptions of things, ideas, and people, which shape our social relationships. To generate collocations in COCA, use the collocates search options. You can put a word or phrase in the main search field and a single variable in the collocate field. Use the drop-down list to set your range to the left and to the right. A collocate search like this will generate single word results. You can also use the main search field with one or more variables. This kind of search will generate multi-word units called clusters or n-grams. Try playing around with the different options to see how they affect your results. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching.